To put it simply, Better Man is the best biopic I've seen since I'm Not There opened my eyes to the possibility of experimentalism within depictions of real life. Todd Haynes' film about Bob Dylan continues to be one of my all-time favorite biopics because it understands and embraces the elusiveness of its subject. A storyteller to the core, Bob Dylan is a person whose biopic would require a bit of mythical fibbing, tall tales, personas, and things that may or may not, but definitely didn't happen. Better Man infuses the best parts of I'm Not There and the strongest parts of Rocket Man to create a spectacle of electric storytelling. And there is, of course, the monkey of it all. I don't go into movies expecting to fall in love. In the back of my mind, I have a small glimmer of hope that I will fall in love, or at least enjoy myself, but it doesn't drive me. For Better Man, it drove me. I was looking forward to seeing it, but then the first trailer came out and my excitement ramped all the way up, to the point that every time the trailer played before I went to the movies, I got a little giddy.
For the next 2 hours, your ass is mine!
And I'm not even a huge Robbie Williams fan, though I guess in comparison to my fellow Americans, I might as well be. After all, I know who the guy is. But I only knew 3 of his songs. Angels, of course, Rock DJ, obviously, and Millennium, because that's my jam. I didn't know much about Robbie as a person, but I didn't really need to. The trailer indicated a creatively shot musical with intriguing imagery, and I became insatiably curious about it. When I finally got to sit down and watch the movie, I was shocked. I expected to enjoy it, which I fortunately did, but I did not expect the emotional journey it would take me on. See, it just so happened that I was seeing the film during a time that was especially challenging. I was writing essays about identifying with vampiric suicide. It turned out that I saw the film at the exact right time. I couldn't wait to talk about this movie, not just in terms of its narrative success as a unique biopic, but for what it's come to mean to me. Unfortunately, very few people were as curious about this movie as I was, so it ended up being a huge box office failure, which I'll talk a little bit about. But I don't want to dwell on the movie's financial failure, not when its successes as a creative tour de force are so much more interesting. Every time I have had a conversation with someone who's not from America, they have said something to this effect. Americans think the world revolves around them. And although I've always thought that notion was true, I never saw it more plainly than when this movie came out and people on social media were having a meltdown about not wanting to see it. TikToks and tweets about not knowing who Robbie Williams is. One person even said they felt like they were being gaslit into believing he was a real person. Robbie Williams' absolute lack of popularity in America is just hilarious, and for Williams himself, absolutely lovely. He lives in the US with his family precisely because he's not famous here. Anyway, brief rundown on Robbie Williams. Robbie Williams was in the UK-based boy band Take That from 1990 to 1995 alongside singer-songwriter Gary Barlow, Howard Donald, Jason Orange, and Mark Owen. Williams was the youngest member, and his struggles with addiction became an unignorable issue for the band, so he was eventually ousted. He embarked on a solo career with a cover of George Michael's Freedom. His debut album, Life Through a Lens, did okay, but when the song Angels came out, well, that blew everything wide open. Angels would become a UK national anthem of sorts and did huge numbers around the world, even briefly charting in the US. By the way, the story behind Angels and songwriting credit in regards to Ray Heffernan is overlooked, and I recommend checking this video out for more information. I don't know if you like pop culture deep dives, this kind of stuff is interesting. Anyway, Robbie went from being the troublemaking runt of Take That to one of the biggest stars in the UK, regardless of what Americans may tell you. Michael Gracie is best known as the director of The Greatest Showman, the musical and semi-biopic about P.T. Barnum. The Greatest Showman is insanely successful. Not only did it become massively popular among moviegoers young and old, but the soundtrack ended up being one of the best-selling albums of 2018. It even spent 11 consecutive weeks at #1 on the UK charts. It became the 3rd highest grossing musical at the time of its release, and if you lived through its popularity, you were in awe that someone like P.T. fucking Barnum could be this much of a hit with people. Little tidbit, Dexter Fletcher stepped in to direct the rest of Bohemian Rhapsody when Bryan Singer's dumbass just decided to not return to work after a holiday break, and although Fletcher directed the rest of the film, Singer got sole directing credit, and that is just messy. Anyway, Michael Gracie was supposed to direct Rocket Man, but couldn't due to conflicts with The Greatest Showman, so Fletcher was tapped to direct that one as well. But Gracie stayed on as executive producer since some of his contributions to the film were still used. Moral of the story is that if one of your directors can't do the film because of a sudden conflict, or the other one can't do it because he's Bryan Singer and he sucks, just call Dexter Fletcher. he's got your back. Michael Gracie knew he wanted to do a film about Robbie Williams pretty much immediately after interviewing him, and he held onto that idea for years until, finally, it started to come together. At its core, Better Man is about the relevance that a person terrified of invisibility will desperately cling to. Like most biopics, this one starts in childhood, as Robbie waits to get picked for a ball game. This little kid, desperate to be put on a team, to be wanted by his peers, is who the film is about. And this is where the seeds are planted. The seed that it's possible for a person to be a nobody. The seed that being a nobody is a fate worse than death. And the seed that Robbie is already a nobody, said to him once by his peers.
You're a fucking nobody!
And cemented by the words of his father, Peter, the one Robbie seeks the most approval from.
You're either born with it, or you're a nobody.
When Robbie says this,
Don't want to be a nobody.
it is the through line for the entire film, and we watch as he perilously tries to prove to everyone else that he is not that. When Gracie recalled one of the interviews he did with Williams, long before the film was even a thought, he quoted something Robbie said that stuck with him.
It's not in the film, there's a really sad quote that Rob says, which is, "If you don't love me, neither do I." And it's sort of, that comes across all the way through the film.
Even before embarking on the journey of getting this film made, Gracie had already considered the fact that America famously has no point of reference for the stardom of Robbie Williams. He thought that it didn't matter, partly because going into any film, you don't know who the characters are. You learn them and learn to love them as the story unfolds. Worst scenario is that people think Robbie Williams is a fictional character and they go see it anyway. The other reason he thought it didn't matter was because Better Man may be the story of a famous pop star, but it wasn't really about a famous pop star. No glitz, less glam. The story we really have here is about someone with gargantuan levels of self-hatred trying to overcome it. It's about a person whose baseline is seeking approval from other people, trying to learn how to be satisfied with the approval he can give himself. It starts with young Robbie wanting to impress his father and just wanting the joy of singing alongside him. Having a father who was well enamored by the stars of the day, he learned from a young age that if he wanted the same love he sought from his father, he would only get it under the spotlight. Conflating fame with being loved, Robbie seeks it, convinces himself that he needs it the way he needs air. When you seek validation from others, you'll never be satisfied with yourself. And that's the lesson that Robbie has to learn almost at the expense of his life. Everybody is intoxicated with the thought of what fame is, even though the examples all around you are people falling down, getting tripped up, becoming mentally ill, being deeply unhappy, resentful, agoraphobic, desperate, behaving in ways they normally wouldn't. Better Man has very little concern for Robbie Williams, the star. Sure, we see his rise to fame. We see the crowds and the houses get bigger, but his financial success is a footnote. More accurately, it's an interview clip.
I've got my platinum disc, and then I'm getting a double platinum disc now. It means I'm very famous.
I got my platinum disc, and then I'm getting a double platinum disc now.
What's that mean, double platinum?
It means I'm very famous.
What matters most is what's going on inside. Even as we see Robbie touring and being adored, the focus of those scenes is not how beloved he is, but how much his self-hatred is taking over, and his heavy dependence on drugs and alcohol. Every single moment of success is undercut by a lifetime of feeling worthless and out of place, which leads me to The Monkey. The Monkey is brilliant. The initial announcement that there was going to be a film about Robbie Williams and that he was going to be played by a CGI monkey yielded a wave of accusations that the project was nothing more than a gimmicky cash grab. When the movie failed to turn a profit during its theatrical run, lots of jokes were made at the expense of the film, and this one was my favorite. Though I disagree with the sentiment that the monkey is a gimmick. Quite the contrary, the monkey is essential to the film and to the point Gracie was trying to make about the entertainment industry. One tagline for the movie that perfectly encapsulates its themes as well as the necessary use of the CGI monkey simply says, "Fame makes monkeys of us all." In the interviews Michael Gracie conducted with Robbie Williams, the interviews that inspired this film to begin with, Williams said he often thought of himself as a dancing monkey, and it was this image that ingrained itself on Gracie's brain for years and years to come. To the point that he knew if he ever had a chance to make this film, he would only do it if the main character could be a monkey. Many biopics about stars stars who make it to the top are about that very thing, feeling beholden to many, feeling like a dancing monkey or a marionette. Making that feeling a visual centerpiece also further instills us in the viewpoint of the protagonist, really wrapping us up in the aforementioned self-hatred. By making the lead a monkey, we become immersed in the subject's point of view, instead of just being told that Robbie views himself as an outcast, as less evolved than other people. We see it, and we feel it for ourselves. Kind of ironic that the monkey was used to demonstrate how unevolved Williams felt compared to others, when the movie itself is an evolution of what the biopic could be. Limitations be damned. The monkey works so well that it's hard to imagine the film any other way. It makes it hard to imagine a human in the role, because the whole theme of not fitting in is tied to the appearance of the monkey. It also frees up the lead actor to completely fall into the role without being worried about not looking enough like the person it's based on. The actor behind the monkey is John O'Davies, and his performance is just amazing. He falls so naturally into it that it's easy to forget there's not an actual monkey playing this role, and he manages to capture the inflections and cadences of Robbie Williams' voice so well that when I first saw the film I thought, now how did they get Robbie to sound like he did when he was 19? According to Gracie, even Williams was tricked. While watching the movie for the first time, he turned to Gracie and said, "Oh neat, you used my voice for that line." And Gracie was like, "No, that's Jono."
Would anybody like to see me fight, Liam? Liam? 100 grand of your money, 100 grand of my money. We'll get in the ring and we'll have a fight, and you can all watch it on TV. What do you think about that?
While we're talking about performances, let's give a quick shout out also to Carter J. Murphy. He plays Robbie as a child and gives a chilling and gorgeous performance of Feel.
I wanna contact the living.
Opening the film with his voice is just splendid, okay?
So he comes in and I go, "Hey, Carter." And he goes, "You the guy who did Showman?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You doing Showman too?" And I go, "Probably not." And he goes, "If you are, can I be in it?" This is day one. I'm like, "All right, mate, let's just see how this goes first."
Yeah.
And then he goes, all right, have a think about it, but get back to me within the week."
Rochelle Bano plays Nicole Appleton of All Saints, and she's amazing. The singing for Nicole and the She's the One sequence was done by Kaylee McKnight, also known as Kaylee, who is best known for playing Jane Seymour in the West End production of Six. Her voice is magical, and she adds so much to this re-recording of the song, it's unreal. Every actor playing a member of Take That is perfectly cast. I mean, look at Jake Simmons as Gary Barlow next to Gary Barlow. Astounding. Allison Mulvaney plays Janet, Robbie's mother, and though the role is small, she does so much with it. She gives it a weight and a warmth that the film would have been a little bit emptier without. The same can be said for Allison Steadman, who plays Betty, Robbie's grandmother. It's not too much to say the heart of the film lies with her. Steve Pemberton plays Robbie's father, and his disinterest in his son reminds me a lot of my dad, so I think that's just pitch perfect. And this is a minor character, but I am very amused by Leo Harvey Elledge's performance as Liam Gallagher.
If I orgasmed every time I had a number one, I'd be fucking dry.
He also played George Harrison in Midas Man.
It's just silly. It's silly. I feel a bit sorry for him, really, because I think he's totally missed the bus. And I think it was proven when you see the band without him singing. You know, they're more in tune and they can, you know, I mean, he's just excess baggage.
Anyway, back to the monkey. The way the look of the monkey was achieved is just fascinating, and I wish there was an hour-long documentary about that process. The CGI was done by Weta FX, and the amount of detail that went into the creation of the monkey, right down to making sure it had Robbie's eyes, his signature eyebrows, and making the tattoos look as natural as they possibly could on a primate, is incredible. They also used tons of archival footage to match with the monkey's facial expressions and movements, which you can see in shots like this and this. And since this is very loyal to the many eras of Robbie Williams, the monkey goes through a bunch of different hairstyles, and a lot of work went into that too. The team behind the VFX famously do fantasy and action films, and were more acclimated to using CGI for fight scenes, for example. So to learn how to do the VFX for something like dancing and singing was a welcome challenge, and I think they pulled it off brilliantly. The music numbers are some of the most memorable sequences I've seen in recent years. Given that this is a biopic, All the musical numbers are pulled from Robbie Williams' discography, and I want to take a moment to appreciate how the song selections are beautifully fitting for the narrative. In many musical-esque biopics, the big music numbers or even just recording scenes simply come down to what songs are most recognizable to the general public and also going in chronological order of what happens in the career of this person. In Bohemian Rhapsody, for example, when the band records Another One Bites the Dust, it's the moment where, well, the band records Another One Bites the Dust. There's no underlying theme, no reason to tie it all into what's happening with the band or with Freddie Mercury at this point in the story. It's a song people recognize, and that's about it. Conversely, in a film like Rocket Man, the song choices are carefully chosen to punctuate Elton John's state of mind during a specific scene. There's a moment in the film where he has a falling out with his best friend and songwriting partner Bernie Taupin, and the song used to convey his emotional turmoil is "Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word," which is, dare I say, a perfect choice. The team behind Better Man put a lot of thought into what songs of Robbie's they would use and how those songs could give us insight into his emotional state. And even though they make sure to sprinkle in notable favorites like Angels and Rock DJ, they don't limit themselves to his biggest hits. In fact, one of the more hopeful moments in the film happens when Robbie collaborates with his future songwriting partner Guy Chambers and they finished writing Something Beautiful. Something Beautiful was the third track and the third single released from Williams' fifth album, Escapology. It went #1 in 2 countries, Scotland and Denmark. Although it was a modest hit, it was far from the most popular track on that album. And even if you go to Robbie Williams' profile on Spotify or YouTube Music, you have to scroll a bit to find this one among his top tracks. It may not have had the radio play of Angels or Feel, but it was the perfect song for this moment.
If you can't wake up in the morning, 'cause your bed lies vacant at night.
We wrote Something Beautiful in Barbados, Guy and myself, and I wasn't having a great time at all.
2 of my favorite sequences are She's the One, the number where Robbie falls in love with Nicole, and Come Undone, a sequence that should not work for any reason because it takes place entirely in a fucking car. The choreography of She's the One is simply unmatched, and it is beautiful. The scene is not just about the beginning of their relationship, it captures the relationship in its entirety, the highs of new love and the lows of a relationship that needs to end. This is a characteristic of each musical number in the film. Rather than highlight a specific moment in Robbie's life, these numbers also serve as passages of time. When Robbie performs at Nebworth and ends up in a fight to the death with his own self-hatred, the musical number isn't contained to that performance. As Robbie destroys these different versions, we see the stage disappear behind him, cluing us in that although this battle may have gotten more aggressive at Nebworth, he was still fighting those demons long after the performance ended. She's the One weaves in and out of the highs and lows. We see Robbie and Nicole dancing in a halo of golden light, but occasionally we slip into where their relationship will go from here, a place much darker. We see their engagement and Nicole's pregnancy, which she is forced to terminate. We see the strain this puts on her and on the two of them as a unit, but Gracie slips us back to where it all started, the dancing, the smiles, the hopefulness, and that makes it all the more heartbreaking. Come Undone is the number we get right after Robbie has been kicked out of Take That. Robbie drives away from Gary's mansion, and after a neat mirror shot similar to the one in the movie Contact, he starts his song on an actual road of self-destruction. This short drive away from Gary Barlow's house is a long passage of time, a time where Robbie is living life recklessly. The drive starts when it's still light outside, but as the song goes on and his behavior becomes more erratic, the sky darkens. It starts to rain. Cars are coming toward him, but he's not stopping. He sees the danger. He's even surrounded by hazard lights, but he doesn't care. The re-recording for Come Undone is also one of my favorite things about it. Those dark, foreboding strings coming in, adding to the whole self-destruction of the number. It's just, ooh, it's riveting.
So rock and roll, so car pursuits.
My favorite part of this sequence is the very end when Robbie sees headlights coming toward him at full speed and he believes he's about to crash into another car. But what he's seeing is his own reflection as he is approaching a wall of water. There are dangers on the road he's on, but what's most dangerous to him is himself. The underwater scene is also brilliantly done. As Robbie drowns, Take That fans descend on him and almost swallow him whole. After they're gone, he tries to swim to the surface but finds that he can't get out because it's frozen over. As he beats on the ice to break free, he sees people up above. Maybe they could help him get out somehow. But all they do is take pictures. Maybe if they're lucky enough, they'll get an actual picture of his body. The surface finally breaks, but Robbie still can't get out as he's dragged down by everyone who wants a piece of him. It's very telling that this sequence does not end with Robbie getting to land safely. Instead, the camera flashes underwater transition to lights reflecting on the surface of the sea, the suggestion being obvious. No matter where Robbie goes, a part of him is still underneath the surface, drowning. The most popular musical number by far is Rock DJ, which is an elaborate and flashy scene shot to appear like it's all done in one take. It's electric, it's larger than life, it takes place in London's Regent Street, and it almost didn't happen. Along with being the most complicated to shoot and to choreograph, the Rock DJ sequence also stands apart from the other numbers because it is the only time in the entire film that Robbie is happy. The movie starts with Feel, sang by a young Robbie shortly after his father leaves, and yes, it makes me cry every time. She's the one maybe about falling in love, but it is interspersed with a devastating heartbreak. Land of a Thousand Dances depicts Robbie rising to the top as his fame skyrockets, but he's also falling apart, drinking and drugging non-stop. Rock DJ is the only sequence where Robbie is excited about his circumstances, excited about the future, and that is why even when everything about this sequence fell apart, Michael Gracie insisted that it had to be in the film. Okay, so people wonder about the cost of Better Man. How could a simple biopic cost over $100 million to make? The decision to make Robbie a monkey, which was the only way Gracie wanted to make the film, which we know by now, doubled the budget because VFX artists need to get paid too. But another thing that made the budget go up was Regent Street. Regent Street is a famous shopping area in London that runs from Waterloo Place to All Souls Church, with Piccadilly Circus an oft-mentioned location and dozens of songs somewhere in between. It's one of the busiest streets in London, which means shutting the area down to film an elaborate musical number costs an insane amount of money, but they were able to make it happen anyway. Because Gracie wanted to ensure everything went well on the day of the shoot, since they only had a limited amount of time to do the sequence, they went crazy with rehearsals. Not just the dancers, but Gracie as well. They would shoot the sequence in a studio over and over again just to make sure there wouldn't be any hiccups the day of filming.
Go down to Regent Street just with an iPhone in the middle of the night and we dance down the street with people yelling at us, is that for TikTok?
So they're prepared and they're ready to go when one of the producers gets a call. The Queen has died. The national mourning period for her death was to last 10 days. They wouldn't be able to shoot the sequence. The shop owners on Regent Street had already been paid, so had the dancers and everyone else involved. So that was it. Rock DJ would have to be cut from the film. They already tried, and they wouldn't try it again. But he couldn't walk away from the sequence. Yes, Rock DJ is a bop. Yes, the sequence is brilliant, but more importantly, there needed to be a scene of Robbie being happy, genuinely happy. So they did what any production with a headstrong filmmaker would do. They raised the money again. They kept rehearsing, and they were finally able to shoot the sequence as originally planned. When you watch Rock DJ, you're not just watching a wonderfully choreographed, creative, and fairly convincing one-take musical number. You're also watching resilience. When Gracie talks about being on set that day, he mentions how happy everyone was. Just to have been there shooting the thing they worked so hard on when it was almost taken away completely had put everyone in a great mood. And maybe I'm being a little fantastical here, but I think that mood comes across. It is jovial and infectious, and I'm so glad they got to shoot it in the end. I don't care if it made the budget go up. I agree that the film needed this sequence, and I'm just happy that it's here.
The joy that people had doing it, even though it was 3 a.m, people were having the time of their life. Even in between takes, the ripple, the laughter, the energy, you got a sense that this was something special. And I think everyone who was a part of that number really felt it.
In the end, even though it wasn't a financial success, I think this was a risk worth taking, and that is what art is all about. So if you've heard of Better Man, you have undoubtedly heard the discourse about how much it bombed at the box office. It's so interesting how failure can make people come out of the woodwork sometimes. When this movie was coming out and the trailers were new, I only heard a handful of people talking about it, but as soon as it was lauded as a box office disaster, so many people had so much to say. Everyone took turns discussing why it failed and where it went wrong. Some blamed it on the marketing, others blamed it on disinterest, but the most common given reason was simply no one in America knew who Robbie Williams was. While not knowing who the subject of a film is an understandable reason for not seeing it, I can't help but bristle when people use that as the reason. Because it's not very often that audiences flock to biopics where they know everything or anything about the person that it's based on. Oppenheimer is a very distinct case, given how much the idea of going to watch it in theaters was driven largely by a meme, essentially, but I can't discount it. I don't think every single person who went to see Oppenheimer was was intimately familiar with who Oppenheimer was. Some were only vaguely aware of him or were placated when told he's the guy who invented the atom bomb. And that's really all they needed to go see it. In the end, Oppenheimer became the highest grossing biopic ever made, beating out Bohemian Rhapsody. But again, Oppenheimer is a distinct case, so let's look at another example. How about one from Michael Gracey's filmography? Oh, that's right, The Greatest Showman is a hugely successful semi-biopic about a circus director. Few people who saw this movie were even aware that it was based on a real person, hence all the shocked Pikachu faces when think pieces were written about how P.T. Barnum was actually a terrible person who probably shouldn't be the subject of such a wistful and warm musical. If you want to say The Greatest Showman doesn't count, I can get that. After all, unlike Better Man, it had huge stars attached. In fact, Michael Gracey's work on Better Man really began when he reached out to Robbie Williams to ask him if he would convince Hugh Jackman to do Greatest Showman.
Michael Gracey came round to my house to ask me a favour. He said, I'm making a film called The Greatest Showman. And I thought he was going to ask me to be the lead. He played me the songs and he showed me the storyboard. And he said, and now's the favour. And I said, ask me anything. And he said, will you convince Hugh Jackman to play the lead in my movie?
Greatest Showman also has stars like Zac Efron, Zendaya, and Michelle Williams. The scales are different for both of these examples, but the point still stands. Audiences don't flock to biopics because they know about the person it focuses on. They flock to biopics when the subject matter interests them. So the real reason people didn't see it wasn't because of musical fatigue or biopic fatigue or not knowing who Robbie Williams was. People just didn't see it because they didn't care. And you can look at the dismal box office returns in places like the UK and Australia for confirmation, because people here definitely know who Robbie Williams is, but they just didn't care to see the film. Sad but true. Better Man is not the first highly acclaimed box office failure, and it certainly won't be the last. In fact, some of my favorite movies are box office disasters. Audiences are finicky, and sometimes a movie that is creatively bankrupt is rewarded with huge box office success. Remember the Emoji Movie? I wish I couldn't. And sometimes a movie that is amazing runs to empty auditoriums. Money is only one marker of success, though. What's more important and more lasting is the quality and the execution of the project. I mean, I bet you can name a show you love that was such a flop that it was prematurely canceled. And you can name a show you hate that is still on the air somehow. It occurred to me that making a video about a movie that no one wanted to see would probably mean that no one would watch my video. And I weighed the pros and cons, knowing full well that my own audience would likely have very little interest in watching a video about a movie that they didn't care about in the first place. But if I've learned anything from Better Man as a film production and as a box office failure, it's that even when you think there's no audience for what you want to make, even if no one sees it, when you make something and put it out into the world, you should still do your best to make it good, to make it great, and to make it something that you care about, something that you would want to watch. People may respond to it, people may not, but if you live your life at the whims of what other people want to see of you,
Who gives a fuck if you love it? What matters is that other people love you doing it.
you won't be happy. So fuck it, here's the video, watch Better Man. I love it, and that's all.